I got into my husband's car and found a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. I didn't say a word. I just secretly replaced it with industrial superglue. And what happened next forced our neighbors to make an emergency call to the fire department. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled. I sat at the kitchen table, the silence in the house as thick as morning fog, a silence that had become a constant, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm, each beat a painful reminder of a life I was beginning to suspect was a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband, Julian, had just returned from one of his countless business dinners. He looked not merely exhausted, but haunted, as if he carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. His face was a map of fatigue and guilt, lines etched around his eyes and mouth that had never been there before. He tossed his jacket on the sofa with a weariness that felt performative, loosened his tie as if it were a noose he was desperate to escape, and collapsed onto the bed, the familiar springs groaning under his weight, without even bothering to shower. The faint scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was mixed with a new, alien fragrance, a sweet, floral perfume that felt like an intrusion, a brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. A few minutes later, the gentle hum of his snoring filled the house, a sound that once brought me comfort, but now felt like a mocking lullaby, a lullaby for a fool. I got up, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 40 years, and began to tidy up the mess he'd left in the living room: his jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The phone screen was still on, a new email glowing like a sinister omen. I frowned. Julian never used email. He always said, "Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." But now, an email. It was right there, in plain sight. A digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading. Out of a morbid curiosity that felt both wrong and necessary, I opened it. The message was short, a mere handful of words that would shatter my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a red heart, a symbol of affection that pierced my own heart with a cold, sharp ache. I froze, as if someone had slapped me, the digital world a cruel mirror reflecting a truth I was too terrified to see. "Dad," the word echoed in my mind. Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate, affectionate tone. I swiped down, my thumb trembling, looking for more clues, but there was nothing. Just a strange email address, a jumble of meaningless characters that offered no answers, only more questions. A shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from a profound, bone-deep fear. It felt like a cold wind coming in through a crack in the door of my life, revealing a secret chamber I never knew existed. I glanced at the bedroom and saw Julian turn over with a sputtering snore, his face still and peaceful, a stark and infuriating contrast to the storm raging inside me. My heart pounded like a thief's, a frantic, guilty beat. I quickly put the phone back, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. I continued cleaning up, my movements now mechanical, robotic. I gathered his dirty clothes to take to the laundry. As I checked his pant pockets, I felt a folded piece of paper, crisp and new. It was a receipt from a fancy steakhouse in San Antonio, dated that very night. I frowned. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting his partners in Dallas. A tiny, bitter laugh escaped my lips. Julian hated driving to Dallas. San Antonio, on the other hand, was where his mother had lived before she passed away. He had fond memories there, a fact he had often reminded me of, But who had he had dinner with in San Antonio while lying to me about being in Dallas? The receipt showed a party of 2, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, a wine he had bought me for our 10th anniversary, a wine I had never forgotten, and main courses of filet and pasta. I tried to remember the last time Julian took me to a place like that. Maybe 10 years ago, when I opened my first bakery. It was a memory etched in my mind. The flickering candlelight, his proud smile, the way he toasted my success. Now, that memory was a lie, a faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. I took out my own phone, and with a silent, determined resolve, snapped a picture of the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe it, but a woman's intuition, a wife of 40 years' intuition, is a deep, primal knowing. Something was going on, and I had to find out what it was. My hands were trembling not just with anger, but with a deep existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint, sweet perfume from his clothes. I opened the door, a small, cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my flashlight and checked every corner of the driver's seat. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just some loose change and an empty water bottle. But as I reached into the passenger side glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out, and my heart almost stopped. A tube of used personal lubricant with dried residue on the cap, a sticky, damning piece of evidence. I stood there in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a dirty secret, a tangible manifestation of my worst fears. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was tired, that age had sapped his desire. So what was this lubricant for? The question echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my fragile reality. I felt paralyzed, but kept a clear head, a survival instinct kicking in. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands with a napkin, scrubbing them raw, as if I were afraid the betrayal would leave a permanent mark on my skin. I continued searching, this time more carefully, more methodically. Under the back seat, I found some crumpled napkins soaked in a sweet floral perfume that wasn't a man's and wasn't my soft, familiar rose fragrance. The scent was alien, defiant, a loud, vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. I took photos of everything, the lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the scent in an image. I closed the car and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me, heavier than any flour sack I had ever lifted. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling uncontrollably as I picked up Julian's phone again. By this point, I was almost certain he was cheating on me. I checked his messages, but there were only work chats, cold and dry like a desert landscape. His inbox was empty, except for that one strange email. I checked the sent and draft folders. Nothing. Everything was too clean, too perfect, suspiciously so, as if he had erased every trace of his deception. A master of lies, I thought bitterly. My rage was now a cold, hard stone in my chest, and a new, more dangerous emotion began to stir within me, a desire for truth, a need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, just as the sun rose and the soft light filtered through the window curtains, I was already awake, a ghost in my own house. The image of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email wouldn't stop swirling in my head, a venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen, my hands busy, but my mind a frantic whirlwind. I made a simple breakfast, 2 fried eggs, some toast, and a cup of the strong black coffee Julian liked. I had barely slept all night. Julian came down, looking tired, his hair a mess, and his eyes still groggy. He sat at the table, grabbed his coffee cup, took a sip, and set it down half full. "I have an important meeting today," he said in a husky voice, a rehearsed line he'd used countless times before without looking me in the eye. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this, I thought. The easy lies, the casual tone, it made my blood run cold. I nodded with a strained smile, though all I wanted to do was scream, "Where is the meeting? With whom? In San Antonio again?" But I held back, my rage a silent fire, and simply replied, "All right, be careful." He got up, gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than a sign of affection, and left. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence, and me with a suspicion that was growing into a monstrous certainty. I cleared the table and washed the dishes one by one, the rhythm of the task a small anchor in the storm of my emotions. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed the truth, hard evidence. I picked up my phone and looked for the number for Mrs. Miller, a friend from years ago who had helped me so much when I first opened the bakery. She had once told me about a good private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. "Juliet, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number," she had said. "He's very discreet and reliable." I never thought I would need to call him, but now I had no other choice. I dialed her number, my voice trembling, each ring a drumbeat of my mounting anxiety. "Hello, Mrs. Miller? Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." She was silent for a few seconds, a pause that spoke volumes before answering. "Juliet, what's going on? Did Julian do something?" I sighed, not wanting to get into the details over the phone, my pride bruised and raw. "I just need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words but profound intuition, agreed immediately, and just an hour later, I received a message from Thomas, asking me to meet him at noon at a small cafe downtown. "Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I will help you," he wrote. The message was short, but it was enough to give me a little relief, a lifeline in a sea of deceit. At noon, I went to the cafe, a tiny place with worn wooden tables and the aroma of roasted coffee filling the air, a scent that usually comforted me, but now felt strangely foreign. I chose a secluded corner where no one would notice me, a shadow in a room full of light. Thomas walked in, a middle-aged man, short and stocky, with a simple light blue shirt and philosophical eyes that seemed to read everything, to see through the surface of things. I handed him a flash drive with the photos I had taken the night before, the strange email, the restaurant receipt, the lubricant tube, and some napkins. "This is all I have," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm not sure, but I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like ash. Thomas nodded, reviewing each image on his phone, his face impassive, a professional facade hiding whatever thoughts he had. He carefully made notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as possible." I looked at him, trying to hold back the tears that were burning my eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. "I just want to know the truth, whatever it may be." Thomas nodded with a compassionate look, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "I'll do my best. Go home and don't do anything to arouse suspicion." I left the cafe and walked through the crowd, but I felt a loneliness I had never experienced before. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime built on a foundation of trust that was now crumbling beneath my feet. I had put all my trust in Julian. I always believed he was a family man, someone who would be with me through any difficulty. He was my rock, my anchor. And now here I was, hiring a stranger to follow my own husband. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I felt like I was in a bad movie, a character in a drama I never auditioned for. That night, as I sat in the bakery, the familiar scent of yeast and flour, a constant, soothing presence, going over delivery invoices. My phone vibrated. A message from Mr. Thomas. I opened it, my heart pounding a mile a minute, the blood roaring in my ears. It was a photo of Julian, in the light blue shirt he often wore, entering a fancy restaurant, holding hands with a woman. I zoomed in on the image, and my heart stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing a tight black dress with heavy makeup, intense red lipstick, and her hair down. They didn't look like father-in-law and daughter-in-law, but like a couple on a date, their bodies turned toward each other, a shared secret between them. I sank into my chair, my hand trembling as I held the phone. Allison, how was this possible? At family gatherings, she and Julian always acted distant, barely speaking to each other. I now realized it was a masterful act, a performance for my benefit. Mr. Thomas sent more photos. In one, they were sitting in a secluded corner, the table decorated with candles and flowers. Allison was leaning toward him, smiling, and Julian was toasting her glass with an oddly tender gaze. I saw the photo and felt a crushing pain in my chest. In 40 years, I had never seen him look at me like that, not even when we were young, when I was that girl from San Diego with long hair and a radiant smile. He looked at me that way, a look of genuine adoration, of a love I thought was mine. Now it was hers. In the middle of the night, a video arrived from Mr. Thomas. The clock on the wall read 2:00 a.m. I put on my headphones, a desperate attempt to keep the secret contained, and pressed play. My hands so shaky I almost dropped the phone. In the video, Allison leaned close to Julian's ear, whispering something that made him laugh loudly, a sound that was a stranger to me. Her voice sounded sweet, her eyes sparkling under the restaurant lights. Then they got up and left, and Julian, ever the gentleman, opened the car door for her as if she were a lady and he were her lover. I replayed the video again and again, a self-inflicted torture. Each time felt like another stab to the heart. Allison, my daughter-in-law, whom I had treated like my own daughter, whom I had taught how to make our family's traditional flan. And Julian, the man I had given my whole life to, with whom I had built a family. What were they doing behind my back? Behind Daniel's back? The questions were a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I saved all the photos and the video to a flash drive, making a note of every detail: date, time, place, even the name of the restaurant. My hands worked on autopilot, but my mind was in chaos. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe Julian and Allison were capable of something so low, so cruel. But the evidence was right in front of me, undeniable, a mountain of proof. I stayed in the bakery among trays of sweet pastries that smelled delicious, but I felt like my world was falling apart. I remembered the early days of the business, when Julian would help me carry sacks of flour, when we would laugh together in that little kitchen, our dreams as big as the sky. Now it all seemed like a distant memory, a beautiful lie I had lived for too long. The next morning I was in the small kitchen of the bakery, holding a list of orders for a large hotel downtown. The smell of flour and vanilla, which always brought me peace, felt empty that day, a hollow comfort. As soon as I finished signing the delivery invoice, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I wiped my hands, and my heart sank when I saw it was a message from the detective. Just a short sentence. Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I opened the message. A series of photos appeared on the screen. The first showed Julian, in his usual gray shirt, leaving a law office near the main plaza. By his side was Allison, in a beige office dress, her hair in a high ponytail, and huge dark sunglasses that almost covered her face, a pathetic attempt at anonymity. They were walking very close together, not like in-laws, but like a couple, their bodies a testament to their forbidden bond. In the next photo, they were standing in front of a 4-star hotel with gleaming glass doors and a gold sign. I zoomed in, desperately looking for some sign to deny what I was seeing, but there was nothing. They looked too natural, too comfortable together, a part of a world I was not a part of. Then came a short video from Mr. Thomas. I pressed play, and my heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst, a frantic drum against my ribs. The shot was from a distance, but it was clear enough to see Julian and Allison on the 3rd-floor balcony of the hotel. His arm was around her waist, and she was resting her head on his shoulder, her long hair moving softly in the wind. And then, like a stab, I saw them share a quick kiss, without trying to hide. It was a brief kiss, but it was enough to burn away the last spark of hope I had left. I replayed the video frame by frame, each image digging deeper into my soul, a slow, agonizing descent into hell. The room curtain opened slightly, and Allison came out, running to hug Julian, her face lit up with happiness, as if she were a young girl in love. I slumped into the chair, clutching the edge of the table to keep from falling apart. Mr. Thomas wrote, "They also rented the room for the afternoon. It looks like they're staying the night. I'll keep an eye on them." I read the message over and over, my throat tight, as if I were being strangled. Just a few hours earlier, Julian had written to me, "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. I have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The tone was sweet and caring, just as it had been for years. But now I knew it was all a lie, a well-constructed lie. A potential partner from out of town. He wasn't out of town. He was here, in a 4-star hotel with our own daughter-in-law. I opened my portable hard drive and carefully saved every photo and every video. Each time I hit save, I looked at the image, as if to make sure I wasn't dreaming. In the video, Julian's gaze toward Allison was so tender. The way he caressed her hair reminded me of the way he used to do it with me, more than 30 years ago. We were young, and I believed our love would last forever, a promise whispered under a starry San Diego sky. Now, seeing this, all I saw was lies and blatant betrayal. I remembered family gatherings, everyone sitting around the table, a tableau of our perfect family. Allison always sat far away from Julian. Sometimes she even looked at him with disgust. Daniel would joke, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I believed it too. I thought they just didn't get along, that she was just trying to fit into the family. But now I understood it had all been a farce, a carefully choreographed dance of deception. They acted too well in front of me, in front of Daniel, in front of the whole neighborhood. I felt like a fool, a blind wife, betrayed by 2 traitors right in front of my eyes. People were going about their lives, unaware of what was happening on that hotel balcony. But Mr. Thomas had captured the perfect moment, like a silent hunter, a snapshot of my reality. I replied to him, "Thank you. Please keep watching. I need to know everything." He answered briefly, "I will. Stay calm." That night I returned to the house that had been my home with Julian. It felt foreign now, a place of ghosts and lies. I opened the dresser drawer and took out a thick envelope, my hands moving with a grim determination. I printed all the evidence, photos of Julian and Allison leaving the lawyer's office, photos of them entering the hotel, photos of them on the balcony, and every frame of the video. I carefully arranged them, sealed the envelope, and hid it at the bottom of the drawer, under old family photos. I looked at a photo of the 4 of us, Julian, Allison, Daniel, and me at Daniel's birthday party a few years ago. Allison was smiling, hugging Daniel tightly, while Julian stood beside me with his arm on my shoulder, looking proud. Now, looking at it, all I wanted was to rip it to pieces, to tear the image of their smiling faces from my life. The next morning, just before dawn, I heard the front door open slowly. Julian staggered in, smelling of alcohol. "The partner was too difficult, Juliet," he complained in a raspy voice, his eyes red as if he'd been up all night. "I had to drink a lot. I'm dead tired." I was in the kitchen with a glass of water in my hand, watching him perform while feeling like he was rubbing salt in a wound. "Rest," I replied calmly, as always, the practiced voice of a wife. "You have to go to work tomorrow." He nodded, gave me a pat on the shoulder as if nothing had happened, and dragged himself to the bedroom. Minutes later, he was snoring peacefully, as if he'd never cheated on me, as if he'd never gone to a hotel with our own daughter-in-law. When I was sure Julian was asleep, my phone vibrated. It was a call from the detective, Mr. Thomas. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he feared someone would overhear him. "Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. I used special equipment. They didn't even notice. I'm sending it to you now." My heart pounded hard, but I simply replied, "Thank you, Thomas. Send me the file." Minutes later, an audio file appeared in my messages. I put on my headphones, sat at the table, and pressed play. The first thing I heard was Allison's voice, cold and ambitious, a stranger's voice. "Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want to have that whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house." I felt a blow to my chest and gripped the phone tightly. Then came Julian's voice, deep and confident. "Don't worry about those papers. Juliet doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much." It felt like a knife twisting in my heart. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to take everything I had built. The bakery chain, all the sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. Baking every batch, running all over town to make deliveries, to keep my reputation. It was all mine. Julian never once got his hands dirty in the kitchen. He never worked the counter or signed contracts with hotels. And now he and Allison wanted to take it all away. To kick me out of the house I had made a home. I almost broke down, but I still had the composure to copy the audio to the flash drive where I kept the other evidence. I carefully wrote down the time and place, as if trying to keep myself steady in the middle of the storm. The next morning, as I made coffee in the bakery, my phone vibrated again. Thomas sent another batch of new photos taken with a telephoto lens. In them, Julian and Allison were inside his car with a thick pile of papers in front of them. Allison had a red pen and was marking the document intently. Julian, next to her, nodded and smiled as if he were in full agreement. Thomas wrote, "I overheard something. It seems they want to use a contact at the notary's office to make the transfer. I'll investigate further." I zoomed in on the photo. I could see the letters on the paper, though I couldn't read them. But I knew. These weren't normal work papers. They were planning to steal everything I had worked for, step by step. I sat there among the trays of sweet pastries that smelled so delicious, but I felt as if my whole world was collapsing. I reopened the audio file, put on my headphones, and listened to every phrase, every word they said. That wretched old woman. That's what Allison called me. I remembered the days when she had just joined the family, when I taught her how to make rice, when I hugged her like a daughter. I thought she was part of the family, that she would be the woman who, along with Daniel, would build a future. And Julian, the man I had loved since I was a girl in San Diego, who swore he would be with me until the end. They had made a joke of me, a fool who still believed in love and family. A regular customer came in, Mrs. Peterson, who always bought pastries for her grandchildren. "Juliet, your bakery has been packed lately. Your chain of stores is expanding. I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice warm. I forced a smile and replied, "Thank you. I'm doing my best." But inside, I was a wreck. I wondered what she would think if she knew the truth. Would she see me as a strong woman, or just a fool betrayed by her husband and daughter-in-law? I wrapped Mrs. Peterson's pastries, said goodbye at the door, and sank into my chair, my hands on my head. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. Instead, a silent rage burned inside me, like the fire in an oven, ready to ignite at any moment. That night, at dinner, I sat across from Julian in the small kitchen under the yellow light that gave his face a strange, distorted glow. He ate and spoke in a monotone voice, as if nothing were wrong, as if the world wasn't about to end for him. "Juliet, I have to sign some important business papers this week. Maybe you should look them over. They're complicated." I picked up a piece of bread and pretended to take a bite. But in my head, I could only hear Allison's voice from the recording. "Dad, hurry up and sign the fake contracts." I knew he was testing the waters. He wanted to drag me into his dirty plan. I gave him a dry smile, a facade of a wife who was too tired to argue, and replied, "Yes, I'll look at them later. I'm tired now." He nodded, took a sip of wine, looking at me as if nothing were wrong. But I knew that behind that smile was a man ready to take everything I had built, a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Julian had a few more glasses of wine. His face turned red, and he started slurring his words about a difficult client he'd seen that day. I nodded as if I were listening, but inside I wanted to scream, "Do you think I'm that stupid?" When he got up, staggering, and went to the bedroom, I cleared the table, my every move slow, containing the anger that was boiling inside me. He threw himself on the bed, snoring loudly, and left his car keys on the nightstand, gleaming under the dim light, a siren's call to my revenge. I stared at them, my heart pounding in my chest. This was my chance, my moment. I entered the bedroom slowly, careful not to make a sound. Every step felt like walking between pain and resolve, between the past and a new, unknown future. I grabbed the keys, squeezed them tight, and went straight to the garage. The night was quiet, hushed, as if the world was holding its breath. All I could hear were crickets outside, their chirping a soundtrack to my silent fury. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The weak light illuminated Julian's old SUV, a silent accomplice in his betrayal. I opened the door. The smell of gasoline was still there, mixed with a strange, sweet perfume. I opened the glove compartment between the seats, and there it was, the tube of lubricant with a loose cap and dried residue on the edge, a monument to their infidelity. I held it in my hand, feeling like I was holding a dirty secret. It was clear they had used it again, as if it were confirmation that Julian and Allison were still playing their secret game, their twisted little dance. I took the tube of lubricant to the kitchen, placed it on the counter, and washed my hands with lemon soap. I scrubbed them thoroughly, as if to erase every trace of the betrayal I had just touched. The fresh scent didn't calm my anger, but it helped me stay focused. I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of clear industrial super glue, the same kind I once used to fix a chair at the bakery. It was a tool of my trade, now a weapon of my revenge. I carefully unscrewed the cap of the lubricant and filled the tube with the glue, drop by drop, until it was completely full. I wiped the nozzle, shook it gently to mix it, and tested a little. It came out smoothly, just like the original lubricant. At a glance, no one would notice the difference. I smiled faintly. though a hurricane was raging inside me. This wasn't a game. It was the first step to getting justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, adjusted the floor mat and the seat just as they were, as if no one had touched anything before closing the car. I opened the trunk to check. There were only crumpled bags, an empty water bottle, and an unused condom lying in a corner. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't surprised anymore. I took pictures with my phone, adding them to the growing collection of evidence. Each image was another piece, a reminder that I couldn't let Julian and Allison get away with their lies. Back in the house, I put the keys back in their place, next to Julian's alarm clock. I grabbed an old book and sat on the living room sofa, pretending to read. The dim light fell on the pages, but I couldn't read a word. My head was spinning. I thought of Daniel, my son, who believed he was living happily with Allison, without knowing the truth. How could I tell him that his wife and his own father were betraying us? I thought of the bakery chain, of the 40 years of work and sleepless nights, of all the fights with Julian to defend my dream. He never really understood it, but I trusted that he supported me. Now I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to take everything. An hour later, Julian woke up and stumbled into the kitchen for water. He saw the keys on the counter and didn't suspect a thing. "Still not sleeping, Juliet?" he asked groggily. I smiled and replied, "No, I'm just reading a bit. Finish your water and go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and returned to the bedroom, snoring immediately. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. This man who once promised to be with me until the end was now planning to destroy what I loved most. But he didn't know that I had already started my counterattack. At dawn, I got up. The sunlight was timidly entering through the bakery window. I was in my usual kitchen, kneading dough, preparing flains and sweet pastries for a large hotel order. I pressed the dough with all my might, channeling my rage into every movement. When I returned home for breakfast, I made an effort to keep a calm face. Julian was already up, with a cup of black coffee in his hand. I served him eggs and toast. "Julian," I said calmly, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'm sure I'll be home late. Can you take care of dinner?" I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He looked up, surprised, but in his eyes, something was shining that wasn't concern. It was relief. "A big contract?" he asked, taking my hand with a feigned tenderness. "Don't worry, go ahead. I'll handle it." But that spark in his eyes, that slight curve of his lips, as if a weight had been lifted, pierced my chest. He wanted me to leave, and I knew exactly why. I smiled and nodded. "Thanks. I'll call you if I get back late." He took another sip of coffee. Then he got up, saying he had to get to the office early. As he left, I saw he had left his phone on the table, and the screen lit up with a missed call. The name that appeared was A.T. I frowned. My heart pounded. Allison Thomas. I was sure it was her. Before I could touch the phone, Julian came back, grabbed it in a hurry, and turned off the screen in front of me. "I forgot it," he mumbled with a forced smile. And he was gone. I stood there, watching the door close, feeling as if I had been slapped. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. That day, I worked like a machine, delivering bread, signing invoices, and smiling at customers. But my mind was only focused on Julian and Allison. I couldn't let them continue their farce behind my back and Daniel's. I needed more evidence, to hear from their own mouths what they said when they thought no one was listening. That night, I pretended to be tired. I went to bed early and told Julian, "I have to wake up early tomorrow to catch the bus, so I'm going to sleep." He nodded, gave me a pat on the shoulder. "Rest, Juliet. Be careful on your trip tomorrow." I lay down and closed my eyes, but I sharpened my hearing, attentive to every sound in the house. Close to midnight, When Julian's snoring stopped, I heard him get out of bed quietly. The faint light from his phone shone in the darkness. He left the room with his phone, thinking I was asleep. I stayed still, my heart pounding. Then I slowly got up and followed him on tiptoe. I hid behind the thick living room curtain and saw him standing in a dark corner near the window. He put the phone to his ear and spoke softly. "Yes, of course. Come over to the house tomorrow. We won't have to go to a hotel anymore. Juliet has to leave town to sign a contract and she'll be back late." I heard a soft giggle from the other side, Allison's sweet voice. "That's great, Dad. Finally we can relax." Julian laughed, replying, "Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting." I stood there behind the curtain, feeling my blood boil. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to turn my house, my son's home and mine, into their meeting place. I returned to the bedroom in silence, opened a drawer, and took out Daniel's old recorder, the one I bought him for college to record his classes. I checked the battery, put in a new one, and turned on continuous recording. I hid it behind the bookshelf in the bedroom, next to the headboard, certain it would capture everything. I carefully adjusted the cable and covered it with a family photo frame. The photo of the four of us at Daniel and Allison's wedding. Looking at it, I felt a bitter taste. Allison's smile, Julian's hug. Now, they were all lies. Before going back to bed, I checked again that the recorder was working. I placed the photo frame just right to hide the cable. Then I lay down, pretending to be asleep. Julian came back to the bedroom, threw himself on the bed, and snored as if nothing were wrong. But my eyes were wide open in the darkness, more awake than ever. I reached for the clock and set the alarm for earlier than usual. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep. I was ready for the next step of my plan. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning when it was still dark. Only the faint light from the street lights was coming through the window. The house was silent. All I could hear was Julian's steady snoring from the bedroom. I was in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the skillet of oil that was already on the stove. It was the last step of my plan, a simple smoke trap, but enough to expose the truth. I tied a thin string to the stove's igniter. I ran it over to the window and attached it to a heavy object, an old coffee can I found in the cabinet. All I had to do was pull it from a distance, and the flame would ignite the oil, creating thick black smoke, enough to alarm the neighbors. I opened the window by the stove a little so the smoke could get out. Then I tested it once. The smoke rose quickly, forming spirals like a warning. I turned it off immediately, checked everything again, and made sure not to leave any trace that might make Julian suspicious. I put on a jacket, grabbed my large purse, and pretended to be leaving for my trip. Before I left, I went into the bedroom and gently shook Julian. "I have to go to the bus station right now," I said in a calm voice. "I'm going to sign a contract. I'll probably be back late tonight." He opened his eyes and in a sleepy voice replied, "All right. Be careful, Juliet. Call me if you need anything." Then he buried his face in his pillow and went back to sleep. I looked at the man I once loved and trusted. Now, lying there, unaware of the trap waiting for him, I turned away, my heart heavy but my legs steady. Instead of going to the station, I went across the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She was my neighbor and my friend. She opened the door and looked at me, worried, when she saw my purse. "Juliet, what are you doing up so early? Is something wrong?" she asked with affection. I forced a smile. "Mrs. Peterson, can I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house." She frowned but didn't say anything else. She poured me a hot cup of coffee and gave me a chair by the window. From there, I could see the entrance to my house, where Julian and Allison would enter, and where the truth would be revealed. Around 10 o'clock, a taxi pulled up in front of the house. Allison got out, wearing a light floral dress and dark sunglasses, as if she were afraid someone would recognize her. Julian opened the door, looked around in a hurry, and quickly ushered her inside. I gripped my coffee cup tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's time," I murmured, and turned on the app on my phone, connected to the hidden recorder I had left in the bedroom. The sound started coming through my headphones: Allison's laughter, the clinking of glasses, heavy footsteps. Then I heard Julian's deep voice. "All right, we don't have to hide in a hotel anymore." Allison laughed. "You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right?" I bit my lips, holding back the rage as I listened to her call me the old hag with so much contempt. Then the bed started to creak, along with other sounds I didn't want to keep listening to. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told myself, "Just a little longer, Juliet. Just a little longer." A few minutes later, suddenly, Allison screamed, "What the hell is this? We're stuck!" Her voice was filled with panic, almost sobbing. Julian growled, "Shut up! Wait, let me see." I smiled. I barely touched my phone and activated the smoke trap remotely. The string pulled hard. The stove ignited. The skillet of oil caught fire. Black smoke billowed out of the kitchen window in thick spirals, spreading outside like an alarm signal. Mrs. Peterson gasped. She looked out the window. "Juliet, your house is on fire!" I pretended to be scared, but inside I felt strangely calm. Neighbors started coming out into their yards, shouting, "Juliet's house is on fire! Call the firefighters!" A man nearby, Mr. Miller, quickly took out his phone and called the city fire department. I stayed there, holding my coffee cup tightly, my eyes fixed on my house. Everything was going according to plan. In my headphones, Allison's voice sounded more and more desperate. "Julian, do something! I can't move!" Julian's voice roared. "Don't scream! I'm trying!" But I knew they couldn't do anything. The industrial super glue I had swapped was already at work, leaving them trapped at their most humiliating moment. I imagined them struggling, scared, and a part of me felt satisfied, not because I was cruel, but because they had pushed me to this. They wanted to take my bakery, my family, even my honor. Now I would make them pay. I looked out the window. The smoke continued to rise, getting thicker. The neighbors were crowding together, yelling in a panic. "What's going on?" someone asked. "Where's Juliet?" "She went out of town for work. That's what I heard," another replied. Mrs. Peterson, standing next to me, looked at me with suspicious eyes, but didn't say anything. She just squeezed my hand gently. I knew she had a hunch, but I didn't need to give her an explanation. The truth was about to explode, and I was ready. Just 10 minutes later, the siren of a fire truck sounded at the end of the street like a death knell. The red vehicle sped up and skidded to a stop in front of my house. I saw Daniel jump out of the driver's seat in his fire chief uniform, his face tense. My son shouted in a firm voice, "Get the equipment ready! Quick! There might be people inside!" I looked at him and felt a sharp pain. My son, always so proud of his family and his parents. Now he was about to face the cruelest truth. I wanted to run and hug him and say, "I'm sorry, Daniel," but I had no other choice. I stayed still, letting everything take its course. The smoke from the kitchen continued to rise thickly, making Daniel and his team believe there was a serious fire. My son led the way with a sledgehammer, breaking down the front door. The sound of splintering wood echoed in the air. His teammates followed him with hoses and extinguishers. I listened to the commotion coming from the bedroom. Julian's desperate shouts mixed with Allison's sobs. "Do something, Julian! I can't move!" Julian growled. "Shut up! Don't scream!" I bit my lips, squeezing the phone where the app was still transmitting the audio from the hidden microphone. They were trapped, helpless, just as I had calculated. Daniel entered the bedroom, and I could imagine what he found. His own father and his wife, naked, stuck to each other on the bed, their faces pale with pain and panic. I wasn't there, but through my headphones, I heard Daniel's voice falter. What is this?" A firefighter behind him murmured in surprise, "Oh my God!" Another couldn't hold back and let out a nervous laugh, but Daniel immediately shouted, "Silence!" I knew that cry wasn't just to maintain order, but my son's last attempt to hide his pain. The humiliation was now exposed, not just to Daniel, but to the entire fire team and the whole neighborhood. A firefighter ran out and told Daniel, "Chief, the smoke is under control. It was just a small oil fire, nothing serious." But Daniel didn't reply. I figured the young man was still in the bedroom, frozen by what he was seeing. The neighbors started to arrive, crowding in front of the door, pointing and whispering. "What's happening?" "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law!" a woman shouted, her voice full of amazement. "Oh my God, how could this have happened?" Another chimed in. Mrs. Peterson, standing next to me, took out her phone and silently started recording, moving the camera closer to Julian and Allison, who were writhing in bed, their faces contorted with pain. She looked at me with eyes full of pity and anger. "Juliet, you knew about this, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I just nodded softly, without taking my eyes off the window. Daniel came out of the bedroom. I heard the thud of his boots on the hardwood floor. Through the headset, I heard Julian shout in a raspy voice, "Get everyone out of here! Close the door, Daniel!" But it was too late. The whole neighborhood was gathered, their faces showing disdain, their whispers sounding like a chorus of shame. "Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the act. Unbelievable!" a man exclaimed. "Poor Juliet, how did it come to this?" Another sighed. The firefighters, after a moment of hesitation, had to act. They wrapped sheets around Julian and Allison, trying to cover their stuck-together bodies, and carried them out on stretchers. I could hear Allison's broken sobs mixed with her groans of pain. "Please, do something! I can't stand it anymore!" Julian just mumbled weakly, "Don't let anyone see us." But the whole neighborhood had already seen. There were looks of revulsion, mocking laughs, and shakes of disappointed heads. They were carried out, wrapped in a thin sheet, amidst the growing murmurs. What a disgrace! Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. My God, how filthy! The crowd was still gathered at the entrance when the ambulance left with its siren blaring. Among the loud voices, I heard bursts of laughter. "What a show!" shouted Mr. Miller. "I can't believe there are two people so shameless in this world." An old woman shook her head and whispered to the person next to her, "Poor Juliet." I stood among the people, pretending to be surprised, as if I had just run there from the bus station. Daniel stood motionless in the yard, his arms hanging, his face pale as a ghost. His teammates avoided looking at him and quietly gathered their tools. I knew that Daniel wasn't just shocked to see his father and his wife stuck together in bed, but by the double betrayal of the two people he loved most. I wanted to run and hug him, to tell him I was sorry for letting him see something like that. But I held back and walked behind Mrs. Peterson, who silently accompanied me to the hospital. We sat in the third-floor hallway waiting, while I maintained the concerned look of a wife who had just found out her house had been on fire. Hours later, a doctor came out, sweat on his forehead. He looked at me and spoke in a low voice. "Mrs. Roberts, we managed to separate them. Fortunately, there was no serious damage. They just need some skin ointment." I nodded, pretending to be relieved, while my fingers discreetly brushed against my purse, where I had hidden 2 tubes of thick mustard I had prepared. "Thank you, doctor," I said, my voice trembling to hide my plans. "Can I see them?" He nodded and led me to the nurse's station, where they gave me 2 tubes of ointment. The nurse, a young woman, looked at me with compassion. "Ma'am, this is a very difficult situation. I'm so sorry." I gave a weak smile, and the moment she turned around, I swapped the tubes for the mustard I had in my purse. My hands moved quickly and confidently, as if I had rehearsed it hundreds of times in my head. I entered the hospital room with a tube of mustard in my hand, feigning concern. "Julian? Allison? Are you okay?" Allison was in bed, her hair a mess, her eyes red, unable to look at me. Julian, still pale, mumbled, "Juliet, I can explain." But I didn't let him continue. I placed the tube of mustard on the table next to the bed and left. Minutes later, a gut-wrenching scream came from the room. Allison was covering her face, crying, "It burns! My skin is on fire!" Julian was writhing in bed, cursing. "What the hell is this? Who did this?" The entire hallway was in an uproar. Patients and family members came out to look. An old woman whispered to her son, "It's them, the couple from the video this morning on the internet. The father-in-law with the daughter-in-law. What a disgrace." Another added, "They deserve it." The doctor ran into the room, asking the nurses to clean their skin and apply a neutralizing agent. But the humiliation of Julian and Allison was already public, impossible to stop. Mrs. Peterson's video of them being carried out on a stretcher had spread throughout the neighborhood and on social media. I was in the hallway, listening to the murmurs, feeling as if the whole world were witnessing the downfall of those 2 traitors. When the crowd dispersed, Daniel entered the room with a thick folder in his hand. I had called him as soon as the ambulance left, asking him to get the envelope with the evidence I had saved in the drawer and the 2 divorce papers I had ready. He handed me the folder, his gaze empty, without saying a word. I opened it, took out the documents, and placed them on the table in front of Julian and Allison. I looked at him directly in the eyes, my voice cold but firm. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these, and then do whatever you want, as long as you disappear from my son's life and mine. Allison collapsed, crying, looking at Daniel. "Honey, forgive me. I made a mistake. Please, I beg you, forgive me." But Daniel just looked at her, his gaze as hard as stone, and left without saying a word. Julian tried to grab my hand, his voice trembling. "Juliet, listen to me. I didn't want this." I pulled away, cutting him off. "Don't say anything else, Julian. You chose this path." He yelled desperately, "Juliet, please." But the nurse came in and warned, "Be quiet. This is a hospital." I turned and walked away without looking back. In the hallway, I saw Daniel leaning against the wall, his head in his hands. I walked over and put my hand on his shoulder, but he didn't lift his face. "Mom," he whispered, his voice broken. "Why did it have to be Dad? Why her?" I didn't answer. I just hugged him tightly, sharing his pain with my own. In that moment, I knew that Julian and Allison had lost everything, their honor, their marriage, even their dirty plan. But Daniel and I had also lost a family. I only hoped that with time, we would find peace. A few weeks after the scandal, my bakery was busier than ever. The little bell on the door wouldn't stop ringing. Customers came in and out with smiles and compliments. "Juliet, you are so strong," Mrs. Peterson said, holding a bag of freshly baked flan. "The whole neighborhood is proud of you for how you defended your family business amidst all that filth." I smiled and thanked her. People supported me. They called me a strong woman, but only I knew that strength came from the broken pieces of my heart. Every time I looked at the oven where I had worked with sweat and tears for 40 years, I remembered Julian and Allison, who wanted to take everything from me, but failed. And I'm still here, with my bakery, with Daniel, and with a new life. Daniel moved in with me right after that day. He didn't talk much about what had happened, but I noticed the change. He wasn't the cheerful, always laughing Daniel he used to be. His eyes now looked deep, as if they carried a wound that wouldn't heal. "Mom, I want to stay here for a while," he told me the first night as he came in with his suitcase. "I'm going to help you run the bakery, talk to clients, whatever you need." I hugged him. I felt the warmth of the son I had raised and just nodded without asking anything. I knew Daniel needed time, and so did I. Every morning, we opened the bakery together. I prepared the oven and arranged the trays, and Daniel reviewed invoices and called hotels and restaurants. "Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their sweet pastry order for next week," he called out to me from the cash register, his voice calm but without its usual brightness. "All right," I replied. "Confirm the order. I'll prepare more dough." These simple moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. There were no more fake looks from Julian, no more sweet and calculating voice from Allison. It was just Daniel and me, taking care of what we still had. Dinners were just the two of us now. We sat face to face in the small kitchen, eating simple meals, sometimes rice with beans and chicken, sometimes just bread with coffee. "Mom, can you make me some flan this weekend?" he asked me one night with a faint smile, the first I had seen since the scandal. "All right," I replied, relieved, "but you have to help me stir the caramel." He nodded, and in that moment, I felt that we were slowly but surely recovering. I started making time for myself, something I almost never did in 40 years. I joined a cooking club at the community center, where women my age shared recipes and told their stories. "Juliet, you make the best flan in the neighborhood," a woman told me, laughing, when I brought a tray. I replied, smiling, "It's a little trick I learned back in San Diego." I also started going to church on weekends. I would sit in silence with the light of the stained glass windows on my face and pray. Not for Julian or Allison, but for Daniel. For myself, so that we would find the strength to move forward. Sometimes I would go for walks with Mrs. Peterson in the town square, listening to her talk about neighborhood gossip. "You know, Juliet," she would say, her eyes shining, "everyone is still talking about Julian and Allison, but they say you're the one who won." I just smiled without answering. I won? Maybe. But the price was losing my whole family. Daniel also started to change. He became less quiet and began telling me about his work as a firefighter. "We put out a fire at the market yesterday," he told me one night as we ate dinner. "It was really dangerous, Mom, but luckily no one got hurt." I listened to him, my heart filled with pride. "Please be careful," I said, my voice trembling. "You're all I have left." Daniel looked at me with tenderness. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone." Those words were like medicine. They gave me back the faith that even though I had lost so much, I still had my son who would always be with me. One afternoon, while the bakery was full of customers, I sat at the cash register, watching the movement in the street. The bell on the door rang non-stop. The smell of sweet bread filled the air. I looked at the trays of flan and pastries and thought about the entire journey. I had built this bakery with my own hands, from a girl in San Diego to a woman who knew how to endure. Julian and Allison wanted to take everything from me, but failed. I kept my bakery, I kept Daniel, and most importantly, I kept myself. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.